Now let's talk with John Killinger. John, we're always grateful to have you on the program. Thank you for being with us again this year.
My pleasure.
I'd love to begin by asking you what role gratitude has played in your marriage. Your lovely wife is here with us today. I know I've gotten to meet her for the first time. 53 years, you told me?
55.
55.
Yeah, right.
Certainly gratitude
She was a child.
I guess so. Certainly
Child bride.
gratitude has played a big part in those years together.
Oh, yes. And it buoys the spirit to wake up in the morning and look over at somebody you love that much and think how grateful you are to be married to that person. You know, whatever dreams you may have had that were not pleasant, sometimes we can't control our dreams, but you wake up and it puts a nice touch on the day to start it, to be thankful for the person you're married to.
There are just no words to convey that kind of intimacy, are there?
The intimacy and the sense of well-being, you know, that
Yes.
you've been gifted, that God has given you something. This is another thing you've been given among all the things that we've been given. And it makes you feel so sad for people whose lives are so impoverished by a lack of thankfulness that they don't feel that way.
John, you began your message earlier by saying the words, "I'm feeling so low."
Yeah.
And you referenced your sadness over missing your estranged son,
Right.
Krister. Can you talk about that?
Oh, we've done very little else for 3 years, I guess. What would you like me to talk
Just
about?
how are you able, where can you put that?
Well,
kind
it's
of
very
pain?
difficult. Yeah, the pain, it's a very real pain, and it's something you never get away from. I mean, we try to think, well, it's like our children died in a car crash, and we can't reach them anymore. We can't talk to them. And we think about people who have lost their children this way. And then we're reminded by something, you know, well, our children aren't really dead. They're still out there. And it's awful to be separated from them. And you don't know what's going on in their hearts and minds. The last time we saw our son, I thought he was having a nervous breakdown. My wife thought he had a brain tumor because he was so unlike the person we had known. But then you look at the world and all the problems people have. You think about all of the young men and women who are coming back from Iraq these days with their limbs gone or their minds not right, afflicted by post-traumatic syndrome and that sort of thing all the time. And you realize that your problem is very small in the light of all the others, and that it's just part of life, that life is a mixed blessing. There are things that make us happy, and there are things that make us sad, but still life is to be given thanks for. It's a beautiful thing just to be aware of it as life.
I was going to say, you called out in your message as well, modeling gratitude to a certain extent. You're coming to a place, you're a man of many accomplishments, obviously, but you're appreciating this idea of wanting to be remembered for someone that's grateful. And it reminds me of my grandmother. That was one of her greatest gifts to me and to all of us. I always felt this deep sense of gratitude for the time that she had with us.
Right.
And it was a legacy that she left behind. Do you want to talk any more about how you're coming to that place? You're certainly still very active. We want to talk about your new book here momentarily.
Well, it's basically, I think, it's a learned skill in some ways. Some people are naturally grateful. I've known a few. But I think, by and large, we have to become more and more conscious of where we are, where life is around us, and how we ought to be grateful for it. And when we have become more conscious, then we move more and more into the spiritual realm. And I think this is in nuns and people who have sequestered themselves from ordinary life, this is part of their task. They are there to learn to be thankful all the time.
Thankful, gratitude. How does affirmation fit into this, John? I mean, it sort of reminds me of a wonderful United Church of Christ pastor, Jim Kidd, who often talked about 3 ways of looking at the givenness of life. The hand-wringers, self-pity, the Stoics, and the people of faith, who just put a big yes, Y-E-S in capital letters over all the good, all the bad, the whole kit and caboodle. Yeah. And so affirmation, how is that a part of this gratitude process?
Yeah, I mean, you're affirming life when you're thankful for things. You're affirming even the evil and the unhappiness in your life, our estrangement problem, we have to affirm that. Yes, that's the way it is, but we're alive, we're here. Who knows, maybe things will change someday. We don't live expecting it to. Everybody says, you know, he'll come back, and perhaps he will, but as another friend who's had a similar experience says, what about all the missed birthdays and Christmases and happy times we would have had? And that's very sad. But still, you know, in the end, no matter how beaten down we are, how ill we are, to be able to affirm it and to say, thanks God, you know, for letting me live. It's wonderful.
We've got a little over a minute left. We want to talk about your new book, John, The Changing Shape of Our Salvation. This is relevant to our topic today because it's talking about appreciation in this life rather than the afterlife. Do you want to tell us about it a little bit?
Well, I think the most unique thing about the book, it's a history of salvation, what the Jews thought about it, and what the early Christians and the medieval Christians and the Reformation Christians thought about it. But basically, the hook in it, I think, comes a little bit later. We talk about what people today think. And I was quite surprised to learn in polling pastors, particularly ministers across the country, to learn how many of them see salvation now more in terms of this life and the fulfillment of one's spirit here, and who they trust God for what will come afterwards. They don't disbelieve in a life to come, but they believe that finding a sensitive way to live, an affirming way to live in this life is more important than what
not a preoccupation with getting to heaven.
Exactly, that's right.
And the book beautifully addresses that. We're looking forward to reading it. And again, it's always wonderful to have you here. Thank you for sharing with us today.
My pleasure.
All
Thank you,
right.
Dad.